Welcome to the You on the Camino de Santiago podcast, Season 5. This podcast is for and about people getting ready for their first ever pilgrimage on the Camino de Santiago in Spain, France, and Portugal. With your host, Camino guide and longtime pilgrim, Nysie Reynolds of the Camino Experience. Well, hello there. Nysie here, coming to you from the Camino Frances, and more specifically, from my favorite Camino city, Pamplona. Okay, not really, because this was edited and scheduled for release before I left home last week, but you get the idea. As this episode releases on September 10th, I am in Pamplona, my sweet home away from home, if I were to have one, the home of my heart, and the start of my Camino story in 2005. On that first pilgrimage, I didn't know about Saint-Jean-Pied-du-Port. I didn't know that many pilgrims started their journeys on that side of the Pyrenees Mountains. All I knew was that the Lonely Planet guidebook for Spain said I could start in Pamplona, and that it was relatively easy to get there from both Barcelona and Madrid. I had a stash of frequent flyer miles, so I booked a flight to Barcelona. I mean, who wouldn't want to go to Barcelona? I found out I could get a bus from Barcelona to Pamplona, so I did that. And as I was waiting to board the bus, I met another pilgrim, a woman a bit younger than me who was planning to cycle the Camino. She knew we were supposed to go to the albergue in Pamplona. I'd never heard that word before, so I just trusted and followed her. In 2005, there was exactly one albergue in Pamplona, in a building that is now a luxury hotel. Now there are 5 albergues just in the historic city center alone. I knew no one else, and since we didn't yet have social media, and the movie The Way hadn't come out yet, the idea of having a Camino family wasn't yet a thing. Of course, I did meet other pilgrims on my first day of the trail because that has always been what happens on the Camino, at least in our modern times. In fact, I met the woman who gave me 2 of my favorite Camino tips: think in kilometers and figure out your pace by timing how long it takes you to walk 1 kilometer. My first day on the trail, fortunately, wasn't a disaster, but I did overdo it, and I walked the first 17 kilometers powered entirely by pastries. Such fond memories. Things are different for me now because I know my way around Pamplona and the Camino Frances, and I know how things work. My nearly 20 years of experience on this route are what enable me to support and empower you on the Camino. Tuesday night in Pamplona, I will be meeting up with my Camino friend, George. You may remember George from seasons 2 and 3. George walked the Camino Frances from Saint-Jean-Pied-du-Port to honor the memory of his friend Aaron, who had died on the trail the year before, just outside of Torres del Rio. George himself had suffered a stroke in 2018, and he wasn't confident he could make the pilgrimage on his own. So his friend John joined him for last year's walk. A true story of friendship. This year, George is walking the Camino with his sister, and we will be sharing dinner in Pamplona. I love when this happens. If you'd like to hear George and John's story, check out Season 2, Episode 19, and the first episode of Season 3. Anyone else planning to be in Pamplona this week? If yes, send me an email and let's see if our schedules match up to meet for a café con leche or some pinchos. You can reach me at Nancy@thecaminoexperience.com. And then if you do send me an email, ignore the automated message that tells you I'm not checking email. I will check email while I'm in Pamplona. Okay, speaking of overcoming physical challenges to walk the Camino, my guest today had to overcome a doozy of a challenge to make her pilgrimage from Le Puy, France to Santiago de Compostela. You may remember Nysie from Season 4, who had been diagnosed with multiple sclerosis, and only recently had she gotten her medications dialed in to relieve her symptoms enough to walk at all. This determined woman took that as a sign that walking the Camino was in the cards for her, and she planned a giant journey. Nysie's pilgrimage on the Camino Frances was quite a transformative experience, and she does an amazing job of explaining what happened that led to that transformation. This episode might just change your ideas about things going, quote, wrong, end quote, on the Camino. Here's one example of what happened. Nysie spent 2.5 weeks in Pamplona convalescing after an Achilles injury, something that could have derailed her pilgrimage. Instead, she allowed herself to be vulnerable and to accept help, and that's when she discovered numerous blessings in disguise. She has truly found her power. On the final day walking into Santiago, Nysie met up with another of my podcast guests, Chad, and his daughter Bonnie, as they were completing their pilgrimage on the Primitivo route. This week, you will hear that story from Nysie, and then next week, you'll hear from Chad with his version. You may want to have some tissues on hand. This one is an incredibly moving story, and tears could happen. I'm just saying. There is so much more to Nysie's story, though, so let's get to it. Hi, Nysie. Thank you so much for being back with me on the podcast.
Thank you very much for having me. I'm looking forward to chatting with you.
Yes, this has been, it feels like a long time coming, but I think that's only because you were on the trail for so long. And so in my mind, there was this whole big adventure that happened since the last time you and I talked. And I just can't wait to hear how it went.
It was a transformative experience.
Well, there's a good place to start, right?
Right.
Well, I'm going to ask you some questions so we can unpack that a little bit. Yeah. And let's just see what comes out, because I imagine you have a lot to share and we just don't know. We just don't know what we don't know. So let's start by putting the pin in the map. Will you remind us where you started, where you finished, and how much time you took for your Camino?
Okay. I started in La Puy, France, which is a little bit south of Lyon, in the cathedral there that pilgrims have been leaving from for thousands of years. If you have not gone to that area to do the Camino, I suggest it. Okay. And I walked through France in the southern part, and I came into Saint Jean du Pied de Port. Did I say that right?
Very good.
And then I traveled on the Frances to Santiago, and then to Fistera,
okay,
to the ocean. And so I started on April 4th.
Okay.
And I finished on July 4th.
So exactly 3 months.
3 months.
Wow. What an incredible journey.
Yes. It was up, plateaus and mountains. And I'm talking about feelings and emotions and experiences. Okay. I had the whole gamut of just being human.
Wow. Well, yes. So take any 3-month period of your life, no matter where you are and how you're spending it, you're going to get all those metaphoric ups and downs, right?
Yes. Yes.
What you did was you said, I'm going to travel from Le Puy, France to Santiago de Compostela, which is what, give or take 1,600 kilometers?
Yes. I know that in miles, sorry, kilometer folks, I traveled 1,000 miles, 1,000 miles, and I walked 600 of those.
600 miles. Okay, let's undo this. So, because 1,000 miles is roughly 1,600 kilometers. That's incredible. So when you planned this trip, Nysie, if I remember correctly, you did not have an intent to walk every step. you had intended to walk parts of it and then travel by public transportation like bus, train, or taxi to move ahead on certain parts of it. And that was by design. Will you remind us why you designed it that way?
Yes. Um, so I have multiple sclerosis, and there were going to be sections that I knew were going to be dangerous actually for me to travel by foot because of the timing. This is the Meseta, and that because it would be so hot during that end of June,
Mm-hmm.
mid-June time,
Mm-hmm.
that I knew that it wouldn't be safe for me to walk that.
Okay.
And then there, I also knew that there might be days where I was too tired to walk, but I had to get to the next accommodation. So I took either a bus or a taxi, or I would walk half the day and then get public transportation the next day or the
Okay.
next half part of the day.
Excellent. So what you did was you looked at what you knew you could do or potentially could do and plan something that fit within that, but you also pushed yourself and challenged yourself in the planning process, right?
Oh, yes, most definitely. I think it's important to take into account that before I left, the most I had walked was 9 miles with my training,
Okay.
and that was like one day. So I started out with 6 miles, 8 miles, take a rest day, another 6 or 8 miles. And then I got to where it was time for me to push those miles. And there were days that I would be the first one to leave the town. Like I knew I was the first one to leave because it was super early. I didn't even get my croissant. Oh my goodness.
How do you start a day in France without a croissant? Just
I
curious.
know. It's very difficult. You have to make sure you find another
The
cafe.
next croissant.
Yeah. And I knew that I was the last one to get into the next town. I mean, I
Okay.
was walking in at dark, dusk. Those were long days, and they were very challenging.
How long would that be? How many kilometers or miles would you have walked on a day that was start first out of town, last into town?
14 miles.
14 miles. So that's just over 20 kilometers, that long.
Hmm. Hmm.
Okay. So in terms of your pace, what was a day on the trail like for you then as you're walking a 14 mile or 20 and change kilometer day? What was a day on the trail like for you?
In the morning is my best time, my most energetic time. So I would usually, if they had breakfast, I would get a little something to eat from the breakfast, or I would just start walking and stop at the next town to get something, or stop at I got very good at going in and asking for fruit, at the little grocery store, which I loved. In the France section, it is not as well like the Shema. The infrastructure for the Camino is not as well established
Okay.
as it is on the Frances in Spain. So you had to make sure you got something for lunch because usually you were not going to find a place to eat lunch. You might find somewhere to get a coffee, but not to have a lunch.
Okay.
So I usually walked and I would take breaks like you recommended every hour. Well, not every hour, maybe every 2 hours, take my
Mhm.
shoes off, stretch, and then I'd start walking again. And so I would do most of my miles is between the morning, because people they didn't leave until like 8 in the French section.
Okay.
And I would get most of my miles done in the morning, midday, and then I would have a late lunch. Ice cream was always important. There was like a period of 2 weeks where I probably had 2 servings of ice cream every day.
Well, that sounds great to me. That sounds perfect. So when you say that people started walking around 8, what time did you usually start walking then?
I usually started walking between 7:30 and 8.
Okay.
Some days, like if I knew I was having a long day though, I was up and ready to go. And some days I just had to sit in the dark because they had locked the door.
Oh
You
no.
could, and I couldn't get my bag down to where it needed to go. It was kind of funny. So yeah, it was, and I walked by myself. I didn't think I was going to want to do that,
Mm,
but I walked by myself most days.
okay.
And I think that's what the universe said I needed.
There you go. Here it is. Nysie, this is what you're doing. So to further clarify about a day on the trail for you. So when I walk in, I am not a fast walker and I get distracted quite easily and I want to see things and take pictures and take breaks. And so if I take my pace of 4 kilometers per hour, 20 kilometers for me would be 5 hours of walking plus an hour or two of break time. So when you say that you started early and finished late, would that be because your actual walking pace is slower or because you had to take more breaks and longer breaks than, say, other people walking the same distances?
I'd say both. It kind of depended what the terrain was like,
Okay.
how well I slept the night before, if I had had long days before that,
Hmm.
or if I had had a rest day before that. It was all really variable. Like there was no consistent.
This is the rule. There's no rule on this.
Yeah, exactly. There was no rule that this is how I was going to be walking every day.
Okay.
Now, I was definitely using all trails, to follow my route, and also using the little, iPhone help thing to see how far I was walking. And I was averaging about 2.5 miles per hour, I would say. And some days I would get in around 3 or
Okay.
4. So that, it kind of, some days were super late, some days were not. And some days that I got in, or 3 or 4, it had been like a 10 or a 12-mile day, and it was just a good day for me.
Okay. Did you have good days and bad days
Yes. Yes, I did.
directly related to MS?
No.
Oh, okay. So we're going to get to that. But so to clarify then, in terms of the MS, how did that influence your experience walking the Camino? Did it play a role? Was it something that was always tapping you on the shoulder or not so much?
It did play a role, but it played a role in a different way.
Hmm.
Like I was always aware of my body, very
Okay.
aware of my body. There were several days where I had to be like, I gotta take a taxi today. I gotta get the bus today. Or I gotta get the bus this morning to halfway point, you
Mhm.
know? So there were taxing times on my body, like exhaustion. But how it really played a part in my experience is, if you've walked before, if you've been a pilgrim before, it's always when you meet someone, hi, what's your name? Where are you from? Why are you walking? What's your story? And so that I loved sharing that space and story with people. And I think because part of my story is MS, and of course that comes out in my dialogue with people, I connected with people differently.
Hmm.
I think if I had not done that. So sharing that story of having that personal challenge, it was a gift for me that people were giving me a gift by listening, and I was sharing a gift with them by sharing
Mhm.
and being open and vulnerable with them.
Was that a surprise to you?
Yes and no. I knew that it was possible.
Mm.
but with not with complete strangers.
Mm.
And this is where I may get a little teary.
Mm.
It kind of reaffirmed my hope and belief that there really are good people in the world.
Oh.
And it was not just pilgrims that I was interacting with. Like I was interacting with locals because that's something that was really important to me. This is not just about walking, but communicating with whoever will talk to me.
Whoever give you the time and the attention.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And not because I wanted the attention for myself, but it was
Yeah.
more I just wanted to say, hi, thank
Yeah.
you so much for being here and providing for us and being patient with us walking through your town and what is your story? Why do you like to be here? And
And what you just said, what I take away from that is that we can take out the word attention and replace it with connection.
yes, I agree with that. Yes.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
People attend to the needs of pilgrims and it can stop there. It could be just getting the attention you need to solve your problems or care for your needs. But I think that step further, the connection is so beautiful. And from what you've just described, so possible on the Camino.
It really is. I'd like to share a story if that's okay, real quick.
Absolutely. Let's have it.
All right. It was more like a bed and breakfast than a gîte albergue place. And it was a little bit off the Camino route. So I kind of had to take a windy road to get there. But once I got there, it was this old French farmhouse chateau thing building. It wasn't really a chateau, but it was a massive old French farmhouse.
Okay.
And there were horses in the field and had this beautiful garden and this amazing wisteria. I think it was wisteria that went up and then up over the front door and then curled around the bottom of upper story windows. Just beautiful. And this woman, it was her family home, and her name was Kitri. And Kitri was one of the most beautiful souls I have ever met in my life. And she had been a pilgrim and she had decided to come back to her family's old farmhouse and work on renovating it and live there and provide for the pilgrims. But she didn't just provide space and food, she provided time, she provided beautiful energy. She let me stay an extra day because that was one of the days where my MS was like, oh God, you really got to rest. Like I stayed in bed all day. And she came and checked on me. She made me food, even though I missed breakfast. And then before I left, we were always connecting in some form. She didn't speak hardly a lick of English, but she did pretty good, to get a little bit out. I didn't speak very good French. But by the end of this conversation, before I left, we were both crying and we both got it. We understood each other. We
What was it?
what is this it? It was
Yeah.
just a a feeling of I am human, you are human, and no matter what part of the world we're from, we're the same. We're different. We're individuals within this larger community. And if we allow ourselves to be open to these experiences and with people, it's only going to fill you up. Vulnerability is not going to take away, it will fill you up.
Wow. Lovely.
Thank you.
Lovely. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, so we're going to sit with that and go on to another question about where you stayed. And then we're going to come back to some more of those stories. So, when
Okay.
you were getting ready for your Camino, will you share with us how much you booked out ahead of time on your accommodations and what types of places you booked.
Okay. So I knew that I needed to have help with that because doing that type of planning and organizing, especially for 3 months,
Mm-hmm.
is very cognitively challenging for me, especially when I get tired.
Mm-hmm.
And so trying to find a place at the end of the day when I'm exhausted is not a good idea.
Got it.
So I had a travel agent that focused on walks in Europe, and their big one was the Camino, and they're called Follow the Camino.
Okay.
And the person I worked with was Jade, and she and I probably spent 4 or 5 months before I left planning an itinerary that worked with my needs because they were very specific, and readjusting that a couple of times. And we even had to readjust it as I was going
Mm-hmm.
because things changed
Okay.
and popped up. And I stayed in some albergues. I stayed in some gîtes, which is the French form of an albergue. And I also stayed in hotels. I also stayed in inns. I also stayed in bed and breakfast. It was a little mix of everything, which was what I needed personally. Because one, if I had stayed in a gîte or an albergue in a room with several people, they would have been very angry with me.
Why is that?
Well, I get up a lot at night.
Okay.
And because sometimes I run into walls, because I'm so like my balance is really off at night.
Okay. I
And
gotcha.
I might have fallen on them in the bed, or I would have made noise. So it was really important for me to be in a room by myself.
So you were actually doing a kindness to your fellow
I was
pilgrims
doing
by
it
not staying in the shared
exactly,
dorms. Really
pretty
generous of
much.
you. I love that. Well done.
Thank you, thank you. But yeah, so one thing I was worried about with this the way that we had organized this, because every third or fourth day, maybe fifth day, I would have a rest day.
Mm-hmm.
And you you hear about your Camino family and how close you get. And I met several pilgrims at the very beginning, like my first day, that was doing that, they were going all the way from La Puy to Santiago. I could have stayed with these folks, but because of my schedule, that wasn't going to happen. And so I was really scared that I was going to feel really lonely.
And did you?
I didn't, because I got to meet more people. I got to experience more people, more different people. I mean, I have maybe 20 or 30 names in my head. Well, maybe not in my head, but in my journal that I have gotten the gift of talking to, either on the trail for like a couple of hours, or maybe sitting at a little cafe in the middle of nowhere in the farmlands having 30 minutes of lunch. But it was a gift to get to meet and talk to that many people. And some of them I still talk to. So I met these two women in Estaing, France, and we had breakfast for like 30 minutes.
Hmm.
So I think that I don't want new pilgrims to be worried about not being able to do it the traditional, quote unquote, traditional way, because you still have those profound experiences with people.
Well, and we have to ask what that means, traditional way. Are you saying having a Camino family is the traditional way?
Well, for me, it's not the traditional way. And for others, I don't think it's the traditional way,
It's a
but
bit of a trick question because
it
there's
is.
sort of an urban myth right now. Well, it's a
Yes.
Camino myth that you get a Camino family. You show up, on your first day or two, you meet these people, you connect with them,
Mm-hmm.
and together you go off and walk all the way to Santiago. And it's one of the things that pilgrims share with first time pilgrims who are going solo. Oh, don't worry, you'll meet your Camino family here or here.
Mm-hmm.
Now,
Mm-hmm.
some people I talk to don't want a Camino family. They want to
Mm-hmm.
have a solo journey the whole way. But I think it's
Mm-hmm.
really important to mention that there are no guarantees that your Camino is going to look like anybody else's.
And exactly.
Yeah.
Not at all. Not at all. There's no way that two Caminos can be the same, even if it's the same person walking the second Camino.
Exactly. True. Yes. Yes. I am a testimony to that for sure.
Mm-hmm.
All
Mm-hmm.
right. So you used Follow the Camino to book your accommodations. If you were
Yes,
going back again to do another walk, would you use them again?
I think so. Yes, there were sections in Spain that I did not get to walk due to an injury.
Hmm.
And my daughter, how I got such a wise 17-year-old daughter, I have no idea. I'm so blessed. And she's on the phone with me, on the WhatsApp phone. And she's like, "It's okay, Mom. I'll come back and walk those with you."
Oh, sweet.
Right. And so I
Yeah.
know I'm going to go back one day and walk those. Now,
Okay.
she may be pushing me in like, an all-wheel drive wheelchair, but we're going to do it. And I think still having accommodations booked for my particular situation is necessary because it
Okay.
takes so much stress
Mm,
and you can fully immerse yourself in the experience instead of to be constantly worrying about where you're going to stay.
mhm.
I know that that's part of the experience for some people, and that's what they want. And I totally commend them for that. But I also did see some pilgrims who struggled with it.
Yeah, who maybe didn't enjoy having
Right,
to spend time at the end of every day trying to figure out where they were going to stay the
exactly.
next day. Yes. Yes.
Especially if there's a language barrier.
Mm, yeah, a little tricky. A little
Hmm.
tricky. So you mentioned an injury. How about we talk about what happens when something goes sideways on the Camino? Will you share with us what happened there?
Yes, I will. Well, first of all, I had many injuries, and gosh, who would have thought a 50-year-old about to turn 50 would get injuries? I mean, come on,
You're so young.
I should be able to get up and just go.
Well, yeah, you're young, you're an athlete,
Yeah.
superstar. How'd that happen?
Yeah. Exactly. So the first injury I got was I tweaked my knee somehow. And this is another thing about the Camino provides, but let's just say that I barely made it to my next accommodation. I'm on the side of a highway because it was the fastest way to get there. And I'm limping. It's starting to rain. I'm on the phone with my husband and I'm like, "Oh my God," and I'm crying and I'm like, "What have I done? I'm so pissed, excuse my language, that this happened, but it hurts so bad." But then the young lady said, "Would you like a ride?" I'm like, "Yes, please." And she drove me. And so that was the first injury. And I only missed, well, actually, I didn't miss a day of walking because I had a rest day after that, I think. But the big one, when things really go sideways, is first of all, make sure you always do your morning stretches,
Okay.
no matter what. And make sure you're always stretching your calves and the Achilles tendon in the back and massaging it and all of those good things.
Okay.
Because if you don't, it's going to stress and get inflamed. And then you won't be able to walk on it. So,
Did that happen to you?
oh, yes, it did.
So this is the voice of experience giving us this advice.
This is the voice of experience. I came into Saint Jean Pied de Port. I actually got there early. Like I skipped a day because of this injury and I got a taxi in. that was hard because I wanted to walk in. That was something that was really important for me,
Yeah.
was to walk in. And that was a disappointment for me that I did not get to walk in because of this injury. So I kept it up for like a day and a half, 2 days, but I had to walk around because I had to get stuff for lunch. I had to, you know, kind of do the bag thing again, to Santiago. And I took way too much stuff. The La Poste and Camino Post people loved me because I was either spent my money at the post office or at the pharmacies. But anyhow, so this Achilles issue, I rested in St. John. I, got K tape, I got ibuprofen, I did it all. I walk up to Orison and it's not feeling good. It hurts. I actually make a video where I kind of have that. I think in every adventure, every journey, you're going to have the lowest point you have.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to start out high and you're going to experience all this great stuff, and then you're going to drop. And you've got to pull yourself out. And it is hard as heck to do that.
It is. And you know what I say about travel? The highs are higher and the lows are lower than what you get anyplace else.
Yes, because you don't have that comfort of home.
Right. It's extreme. It's like the volume gets turned up on everything.
Yes. But here's the interesting thing, which another thing about the Camino provides. As I'm walking up to Orson and I get to a point where I'm like, I am so distraught and I'm missing home. And I had just missed my daughter's 17th birthday, and I had just missed something really like a profound experience that the juniors have at her school where the parents get to witness it. And I missed that. And so I'd make this video and I'm bawling. And I'm thinking of all these naysayers in my head, like, oh, well, you don't need to be eating sugar, that's going to make it worse, or you don't need to be eating gluten. And basically, I'm just like, don't tell me what I can't eat. I'm saying this to the video. It's like my way of getting out my anger that this has happened and getting out the pain. And so after I kind of had my cathartic experience going up this hill, about to pee in my pants because I can't find a tree, this lady starts coming up behind me, and she's hoofing it. She is moving. I introduce myself, and she immediately starts throwing up.
Vomiting?
Yes.
Oh,
And so she had gotten some sort of food poisoning or something. She had just started. That was her first day.
oh,
She was having it. I felt so bad for her. And I just stayed with her. And she gave me a gift by letting me help her. And so I just helped her get up to Orison, to her place, and made sure she was drinking. And I gave her one of my, hydro tablets. She was probably really dehydrated. And she was from the States, so it was easy to communicate. And then it was a gift because I got to see on Facebook her journey and that she made it. And then she reached out to me afterwards saying, I wouldn't have made it without you. I would have quit. And so it just, even when you're at your lowest, you can be at your highest because you get to help someone. I hope that makes sense. But
well, it's a beautiful example of what do we do when things go wrong? How do we relate to it? And so maybe a purpose of your Achilles problems was it slowed you down so you could be in exactly the right spot to help this woman. And had your Achilles not been giving you trouble, you wouldn't have been there.
well, that's probably very true. Yeah. Because I ended up meeting two more women who had injuries because the next morning I couldn't put any weight on it. And so basically, I eventually made it to Pamplona and spent 2.5 weeks in a hotel room.
2.5 weeks in Pamplona. So this
Yep.
trip that you'd planned, 3 months, I want to make sure everybody's got the picture in their head. This
Yep.
3 month trip and 2.5 weeks of it had to be spent convalescing
Yep.
in a hotel in Pamplona. Now, that last part in Pamplona to me would be like, yay, but not if you think you're supposed to be walking the Camino. All right, talk to me about that experience. What was going on in your mind and in your emotional state as you are convalescing in Pamplona?
I was so pissed, so angry. I mean, I have it in my journal, that I'm looking at right now that why is this happening when I have been challenged with body illness issues for 12 years and I finally get to where I can do this? The MS is okay. I'm able to walk. I have energy. I've been feeling strong. And then I get an injury. What the, that's what I'm thinking. I'm like, how is this possible? Why is my body failing me? And I'll be honest, I spent a lot of time. I mean, I spent the time journaling and I spent the time painting in my, watercolor journal, but you can only do that for so long. And I'm not going to lie, I probably spent half that time when I wasn't sleeping watching reruns of Chicago Fire because it was the only thing I could find in English.
You know what? Seriously, this begs the question. How do you spend 2.5 weeks in a hotel in another country? What do you do? How do you fill those days when you're used to walking 5 to 6 to 7, 8 hours a day? What do
Yep.
you do? And that's the answer.
Yep. You just have to
Deal with it.
you just have to deal with it.
Yeah.
You really start to go inward. And so I call this my meseta.
Okay. Share more about that. What's the Meseta thing about?
So it's the big grain field region for Spain that the Camino walks through, that the trail goes through. I don't even really know how long it is, but this was the section I was going to actually be taking, traveling differently on the Camino because it was going to be too hot, which is really bad for my MS can be quite dangerous. And there's no shade.
There's no shade. So let me just stick in here. The Meseta, when we talk about it as pilgrims, we're talking about Burgos to Leon, which is approximately 180 kilometers. So if you walk at a pace of 20 kilometers a day, that's around 9 days of walking. Yeah. Most people, many people, I should say, will do longer stages on the Meseta because it's relatively flat. So they'll do it in fewer days with longer stages. But you already knew you were skipping that. But the key with the Meseta is when we look at the overall trajectory of the Camino Frances, there's one analysis of it that says from Saint Jean to Burgos is the physical part of the journey where you deal with all the physical challenges and get your body strong and your pack organized so you know where everything is and you just fuss with physical things.
Mm-hmm.
From
Mm-hmm.
Burgos to Leon, they say, is the mental part of it, where you are
Mm-hmm.
forced to go into your mind because there's so
Mm-hmm.
much, the trail itself is relatively monotonous. And so the only thing to do is go into your mind. And so when you compare your time in Pamplona to the Meseta,
Mm-hmm.
that's that inward journey, getting to know your mind and seeing what it has to say that maybe you do or do not want to hear.
Exactly. Yes, you said it perfectly.
And so, just to finish out that conversation, the third part is from Leon de Santiago, which some interpretations say is the spiritual or the soul part of the Camino Frances. Is that it? Is that real? Is that what happens? For some people, yes, that is how they would describe their journey. Other people, not so much. So, let's go back to Pamplona. You're in Pamplona. What else did you do for 2.5 weeks? What else would you share with us about that?
Well, I'll say this. The hotel took such good care of me.
Where'd you stay?
Okay, so I know I'm going to get this name wrong. but it was the hotel that Hemingway would always stay at.
Oh, La Perla
Yes,
on the Plaza del Castillo.
yes.
Ooh, you stayed there for 2.5 weeks?
Well, no, I
I guess I'm
stayed.
jealous if you did.
I stayed in. It was kind of funny because like for 1 or 2 nights, I stayed in an albergue with a woman I met because she had already booked this place. And then I went to Europa
Hotel Europa, sure.
and I stayed there for about a week. And then the rest of it, I stayed in La Perla?
La Perla, Hemingway's
La
house.
Perla. Yes, Hemingway's house.
Yeah.
And they took such good care of me. I mean, they were like walking out the door like I was this long lost relative, putting me in the taxi when it was time for me to finally go, going, oh, and they were hugging me and I was hugging them. So that's another kind of gift to be able
Yeah.
to make that connection with locals.
Yeah.
And the reason that I went to a hotel like that, it was the only one I could find that had availability, was that they could bring me breakfast and they could bring me ice
Okay.
because other places wouldn't do that. And I needed that to happen because it was hard for me. And they put me on the first floor because I called them and I said, this is what's happening. I need a place to stay. I'll probably be there for a week and several days. No problem, Miss Hurst. We got you covered.
Great.
And that was a Camino provides because I was supposed to be walking.
Yeah.
And so all of my reservations got canceled luckily I have trip insurance. So my little advice to everyone is to get trip insurance because you never know what's going to happen.
Especially if you prepay for anything.
Yes.
Yeah. The nature of the Camino, there's a good chance of injury. You can prevent most injuries, but there statistically quite a few pilgrims do get injured. And so trip insurance, if you've prepaid, is a good idea, in my opinion.
Yes, I agree. I agree because I had to fork out quite a bit of money
Mm.
for food, number
Hmm.
one, because all my meals were paid for with the
Yeah,
prepaid accommodations,
sure.
breakfast and most dinners and all breakfasts. So,
Okay.
but I think the big thing is I had to ask some pretty significant questions of myself. And I knew that my pilgrimage was going to be different from others because I was going to be traveling by wheels sometimes instead of by my feet.
Hmm.
And I called one of my best friends and I was in tears on the phone with her. And I said, I don't understand. I don't know what to do. Do I need to cancel? Do I need to go home? Do I just get an Airbnb somewhere for the rest? It doesn't really make sense for me to go home and then my family, to fly back because we already have things prepaid for Greece, et cetera, et
Yeah.
cetera. And I mean, there was a lot to think about. And she said, I wish I could help you, Nysie, but I can't answer those questions for you.
Mm.
She said, you're going to have to figure out what those answers are. And she says, you're going to have to figure out what does it really mean to have a complete pilgrimage? What does it mean to be done? And she goes, you will have to answer that question.
Really sage advice. Yeah.
Yep.
And what answers did you come up with?
Well, I knew that Santiago was important to me to get there, no doubt. But because it had always been a dream of mine to go all the way to the ocean, to the end of the world, to swim in that water, to find my scallop shell there. I didn't buy a scallop shell and carry one I had like a little keychain with one on, but
Mhm.
not one of the big white ones because I wanted to find it at the beach.
Mhm.
Somebody told me that, yeah, it's real easy to find them. Well, maybe not. Yeah. So
It's a bit of an overstatement.
it's a bit of an overstatement,
Yeah.
but I did go one. So I had to ask myself, okay, I want to get to Finisterre. How I get there, is that what's important? Or is it important that I just get there?
Mhm.
Or is it important that I get there with what my body will allow with a good attitude?
Mhm.
So lots of journaling, lots of crying. And I decided that I couldn't make those decisions that far out.
Mhm.
So I was still 2 weeks out, 2.5 weeks out, maybe. I can't remember. I decided to stay. I was staying. I knew I was staying for this period of time to rest my foot. And I thought it was good. And so I tested it and I walked around the the plaza. And sometimes I like would take my crutches and go sit out on the plaza and sketch and paint,
Nice.
which was awesome.
Yeah.
But then I walked around in some of the streets and the shops and so forth, and it started to hurt. Jeez. So I was back on the crutches because I did go to the ER to get it checked out. So I was back on the crutches and I took the crutches and I took them onto a train and I took a train all the way to Saria.
Okay.
And I knew I had 2 nights in Saria. So I stayed in Saria for 2 nights. I rested it. I got to know some local ladies, older ladies that would come to the little cafe and the little hotel I was staying at, and they chatted with me. We used Google Translate. And one of the ladies who was a little bit younger said, "Oh, I'll be happy," because I wanted to know about the history of Saria and about any stories they might want to share. And they were like, no, here, senorito." They passed me on to somebody else. And so that was a gift. You know, if I couldn't walk, there was always some other gift.
I love that.
So, and then I started walking.
Okay. It's a great way to look at it. So I want to ask you a looking back question. So now that you're home, you finished your journey, you made it to Santiago. We're going to talk about your arrival in Santiago in a minute. When you look back over the whole journey, that 2.5 weeks sitting in Pamplona, the Achilles problem, the knee problem, all of these bumps in the road, how do you relate to them now? Are they problems? Was your Camino wrecked? Was your Camino a disappointment? How do you relate to it?
No, it it was not a disappointment. I may start crying. I have so much more confidence in myself now, and I don't know what your earlier years were or how you grew up, but for me, I grew up in the South, and I was born in 1974, so 70s, 80s, and that's when you get a lot of your culturalization
Yeah. Early messages.
early messages. And that was, you must always be a lady. You must never be proud about your successes and you must never talk about them. You must be very, very humble. Well, I would just like to say that's BS
Mm,
because of this trip, I have internalized, not logically said it, but internally said it, that I am a good mother and I have raised an amazing daughter because I did that. Nobody else did that. I mean, my husband had his part too, and he did great. But I'm a good mother. I'm a good artist. I'm a damn good artist. And I'm a good person. I'm a good partner. And I am not going to let the society around me dictate how I view myself and how I see my successes. And I'm going to celebrate them.
right on. Yes.
So yes. Woohoo!
It's awesome. They can't see, people listening can't see the video, but we're waving our arms in the air and cheering, and yeah. It doesn't sound great on a recording, but we're dancing in our chairs. This is great.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
what a takeaway.
Yes.
Oh,
So I'm going to take up space. I'm going to share space, but I'm going to take it up, and I'm not going to be thinking, oh, they're just saying they like my painting because they want me to feel good. They're my friends. No, I do good work.
right
And
on.
I'm a good person and I'm connecting with people and I am making an effort.
Yeah.
So because of those bumps in the road and because of the highs and the lows, I mean, it was a transformative experience.
I can see it. Yeah, I can see it. And just how you're carrying yourself and how you're presenting yourself and sharing your story. Very exciting.
Well, thank you.
Let's ride that wave into Santiago. Let's talk about your last day on the Camino. And this is where I'll cry.
I know.
Yeah.
I got up super early. This is the first time I've worn my headlamp and I'm walking out. I'm like the second person out of this town. Because if anybody had gone before me, they were going in the middle of the night because I probably left about 6 o'clock in the morning.
Okay.
And I saw one other person. And we're going down this dark trail, out of the city or out of this little town. And like, all right, man, I guess this is good. I can do this. And so I had been walking for about maybe 3 hours or 4 hours. And by this time, the whole town has passed me. And this was a norm every day.
Okay.
Me starting out and then, hey, how you doing? Oh, good to meet you. I'm waving. Everybody's passing me. And that's okay. I didn't mind being the caboose. So I get to this point where you kind of are jetted out right next to this massive highway. And there's this statue there. And a lot of pilgrims will leave things there. And so I just step up to it and I'm looking at it, kind of just taking in the moment, being present, had my moment. And as soon as I walk away, you can tell it's a father and daughter, group, just a father and a daughter come up and they're looking and he's taking a picture of her. And before I left Saria, there was a father and daughter talking physics. They were, having this conversation about physics. And I didn't say hello then, but I said hello that last day, thinking, "Oh, hi, I think we stayed in the same hotel in Saria." And they're like, nope, nope, we came from this direction." I'm like, "Oh, okay, well, hi anyway." And then we start to share our stories as pilgrims do. And he starts saying something. He says, "Oh, my name is Chad. My name is Bonnie." I'm like, "Oh, yeah, it's nice to meet you." And he starts talking, and I hadn't said my name yet for whatever reason. And the name didn't register, but his voice sounded familiar. And I was like, "Why does this voice sound familiar to me? This is so odd." And he starts talking about, "Yeah, my family and I did the route from, we did the Porto route. I think that was what it was.
Lisbon. The family walked from Lisbon.
Right, from Lisbon. And then I just finished this route. And now I'm doing this with my daughter." And
The
I'm like,
Primitivo. Yeah, they were walking
the
the Primitivo.
Primitivo.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And I said, wait a minute. Can I ask you a question? He's like, "Well, okay, yeah, sure." I said, "Did you do a podcast in the States with a woman out of California?" And he looked at me like, "Are you stalking me?" No, I mean, he was really nice. He goes, "Well, yes, I did." I said, "Was it Nancy?" And she's like, yes, it was Nancy." And I'm like, "I'm Nysie." And he immediately knew. I said, I did an interview with her too. And he immediately knew who I was, which just filled me with such appreciation and joy. And I was just like, holy smokes, how is this possible? Because if I had left any other time, it would not have happened. If I had not stopped at that statue, it would not have happened. If they had not stopped at that statue, it would not have happened.
Well, let's back up a second. You started in La Puy and had been on the road for almost 3 months. They started from Oviedo on the Primitivo, completely different route, at a completely different time, walking at a completely different pace. And you met 10 kilometers outside of Santiago.
Yes. And it was unbelievable. And I knew that this day was going to be hard because it was a long day. And we talked for 10 minutes and I knew I needed to take a break. I said, would you want to stop and I'll buy you coffee so we can chat? And I need to rest a little bit because they kind of sort of knew, my situation, because he said he had heard my my interview, like I had heard his interview.
Yeah.
And then we just sat and chatted, all three of us, and got to know each other. And it was just instant friends. It's like, instant pot of noodles. We were like instant pot of noodle friends. And it was wonderful. But it was more like instant cafe friends.
Oh, my word.
And we were both, you could see the glassiness in all of our eyes.
Well, yeah, I got that going on right now. They can't see me, but I'm like, just.
Yeah. Me too.
And this is one of my happiest moments when I hear that my podcast guests met each other on the trail. It's how I feel when I meet my podcast guests on the trail. It's just this unbelievable joy of connection. Yeah. All right. So you had coffee with them and you chatted for a bit and then they walked on. You walked on. What happened next?
Well, Chad shared something with me that I want to share with the podcast. And that is, he goes, I want you to read my text because I want you to know that I am not just trying to blow smoke, And so he shows me this text that he has texted to you.
Yep.
Right after you and I's interview was aired.
Right.
And he had said very kindly and sweetly, what a great interview. Do you know when she'll be finishing? Because I wonder if we'll be finishing at the same time. Okay, everybody, if you can hear me, I am like totally taking my hand and smacking my head off. I'm like,
yeah, like, what? Wait a minute. Who is queuing up these interactions here, these connections? Yeah.
Thank you. It was exactly what I think we all needed to give us that little boost.
Yeah.
And we were totally comfortable with, you know what? We're going to go ahead, or you go ahead. I can't walk your pace. My pace wasn't good for them. Their pace wasn't good for me. And it was okay. And we were going to meet up in Santiago and have coffee when I got there. Well, it took me a lot longer to get there than I thought I was going to, because my foot started hurting. So, I was stopping and retaping and it was hot. And so that always
slows me down.
And I was getting hungry because I hadn't really done a very good job of packing for a lunch. And so I stopped right outside of Santiago, like kind of like in the, the urban outside section at the edge. And I ate a late lunch and I get this text and they're like, hey, where are you at? What are you doing? And it was from Chad and Bonnie. And I said, well, I'm here. And I need to get something to eat. And according to all trails, I'm about, I can't remember, maybe an hour
Close.
and a half away. I'm close. And you think that you're so close and you're going to be there right around the corner. But then there's another corner.
There's a lot of corners. The final hour into Santiago to the cathedral is the final test
Yes,
of
it
your
feels,
determination to get there. And you were going at
yes,
Nysie speed.
right. And I
Yeah.
was getting there late. I think it took me about 10 hours that day to walk.
Okay.
It's probably one of my longest days ever. Yeah, I think it was my longest day. So I'm on the phone with Adrian, my husband. I'm like on, WhatsApp, FaceTime thing, video talk. And I was like, I'm almost there. I think it's happening. I'm going to make it.
You sound like you're in labor.
I know. I am. I'm in labor to get this walk done. And as I am on FaceTime, I don't realize how close I am because I'm probably 50, 75 feet from the tunnel, the archway where the bagpiper is.
Okay. Which has the stairs that lead down into the plaza in front of the cathedral. Okay. So you're close.
Yes, I'm close. And
Okay.
I'm like, yeah, I'm almost there. And then as I'm talking to Adrian, I'm getting these texts from Chad and Bonnie. And he goes, oh, where are you at? I'm like, well, he goes, drop me a pin. And I'm like, okay, hold on a second, Adrian. I got to drop my new friend a pin. So I drop him a pin and I turn around and there's Chad right there. I'm like, oh my God, Adrian, it's Chad. I'm showing Adrian, Chad and Bonnie on the phone. And then Chad and Bonnie start talking to Adrian. He's like, don't worry, Adrian. We're going to take care of her. We're going to film her coming into Santiago, into the Cathedral Plaza, so you guys can see it. And I was like, what? You're going to do that for me? And they're like, of course, we're going to do that for you. And so they're filming me, and it's so surreal. And I'm laughing and I'm crying and I'm like stumbling into the plaza, one tiny foot step at a time, but they take the time to do it.
Oh,
It was so moving to me, their generosity to do that. It was such a gift, and my family loved it, and my friends loved it. People tell me that all the time because they're like, it's an authentic reaction. I'm
oh,
like,
it was
yeah,
so authentic. And you know what? Chad sent me the video right after, right after. And I'm not kidding. I watched it and when you're so joyful and you're crying, so you're laughing and crying at the same time. I
yeah,
mean, I was just laugh, cry, sobbing. I'm just like
yeah.
so filled with joy watching you arrive in Santiago, knowing some of what you had to go through to get there.
Yeah.
May I share that video with my listeners? May I put it in the show notes?
Yes, you may.
Okay. So thank you. Thank you. So it's in
You're
the show
welcome.
notes, everyone who's listening, and you just have to watch this video. It's so uplifting and it's so satisfying now that you've heard about Nysie's journey and what she went through to reach the Cathedral of Santiago. And that's not the end. Your journey continued. You went to the coast and had that
Mm-hmm.
experience. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yep. And the Camino still continues. I don't
Yeah.
think you leave it. And I
Mm.
think that's how it should be.
Yeah. Or it doesn't leave you.
Or it doesn't leave me. And now maybe I can share it with other people. And maybe my story hopefully will be somebody will listen and go, I can do this.
Yeah. Yeah.
I can do this. There's a way for me to do this.
Yes.
I just wanted to say one thing that I met this one man and he was supporting an individual pushing a woman in a wheelchair from Lisbon to Santiago. So there are ways.
There are ways.
There
Yeah.
are ways.
Yeah. The takeaway is don't let your physical limitations keep you from having a pilgrimage on the Camino de Santiago. It may not look like anybody else's,
Yes, correct.
but don't let that stop you.
Yes.
So talk about
Yes.
takeaways. What's next for you?
So I've been so blessed with all these amazing experiences, and my head is exploding with all of these wonderful ideas for a large body of work of paintings
Okay.
that will tell my story, but overlapping that will be story of those who came before. Because if you have or you haven't gone to Camino and you're planning on it and you're planning on doing it again, there's a little treasure hunt that you can do that I have discovered.
What's that?
All of those blocks and those cathedrals and abbeys and so forth, they had to be built by somebody.
Mm-hmm.
And those were masons. And the only way the masons got paid, they got paid per block. And the only way they could show that they did that block was to put their sign on it. And they didn't read or write. Most of them didn't read or write. So they came up with their own symbols. And I have collected so far over 50 plus symbols, 50 plus masons from like I didn't learn about it until like midway through France.
Okay.
And then I was looking for those symbols all the way to the end. And they're there. And so that will be part of those who came before that helped, that allowed for us to have this journey, because it wouldn't have gone this way if these weren't these cathedrals in these certain parts where the path followed, because the path follows to these different sacred sites and that people would go to in the beginning to stop at. And then it will be overlaid with my story, my pilgrimage, and then it will be overlaid with others' stories that I got to have the gift. It was a gift of learning and listening to and collecting. And I don't want to say yet what it is, but make it a little surprise, because I'm very bad about keeping secrets and surprises, but you know.
So how will people find you if they want to follow what you're doing?
So I have a website,
Okay.
and it is Nysie, Nysie, Hurst, Hurst, art.com.
Okay. I'll make sure that's in the show notes so people can follow
Thank
your
you.
work.
Yeah, thank you. And there'll be a blog there that I'll be talking about this experience more. And I was going to do that on the trail, but yeah, I was too tired.
Takes a lot to keep up a blog while you're on the Camino. Yes, yes.
Yeah.
It is quite
Yeah.
taxing physically and mentally.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah.
But it's worth it.
All right. Well, you've shared some wonderful stories. I'm so glad I had a chance to hear. I've just been waiting ever since Chad sent me that video. I've been waiting, counting the days until I could get your whole story and hear how it went. Really appreciate you coming on the show again.
Well, I appreciate you. You have been such a big part of my journey, either through my prep or things. I'm like, oh, Nancy said that might be a good idea. Woo, it's a Nancy light bulb. I better put that in my journal that I need to do that, and then that connection with Chad, and because they're lifelong friends. Feel
Great.
like you're a lifelong friend, and
Definitely.
thank you just for the opportunity.
Ah, very good. Well, it's for my betterment. No question about it. Yeah. Thanks, Nysie. I think we'll wrap it up
Hmm.
there. And then if you and your daughter do go back to walk the Camino again, you'll be right back here again talking about that because I will invite you back.
Well, thank you
Yeah.
very much. I'll
All
keep you
right.
posted.
Excellent. Thanks, Nysie.
Thank you.
All right.